today's webinar. My name is Carla Lauder, and I am the editor for AEC Next. I first want to thank Newforma for their support of today's webinar, which is 5 little-known secrets to more efficient contract management process. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. If you have any technical questions or issues using the webinar platform, please use the chat box and we will respond right away. If you have any issues with audio, please click on the phone icon above the chat window to receive the teleconference info. For those who are calling in, to ensure call quality, everyone's lines have been muted today. However, we do want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can do so by typing your questions into the Q&A box and then selecting all panelists when submitting your question. At the end of the presentation, we will have our presenters answer those questions, and if we're not able to get to all the questions, we will respond after the webinar via email. If you happen to get disconnected, you can log in again using the instructions that were provided in the webinar confirmation email. If you continue to experience difficulty, please email info@aecnext.com and we will respond right away. This webinar will be recorded, and you will receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 2 business days. Now, with that out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce the people who are going to help us bring better efficiency into our contract management process. Brian Guidotti is a solutions consultant and customer success manager at Newforma. Over the last 10 years, he has held multiple positions within construction IT before transitioning into the software industry, assisting architects and engineers in the implementation of project information management software. Currently, Brian serves as project information management expert, helping Newforma customers with their unique project information challenges and maximizing their investment of Newforma products. Lauren Cheney is an associate with SFCS Architects, a full-service architectural engineering and interior design firm specializing in creating solutions for senior living communities, higher education campuses, and cultural and civic facilities. In Lauren's current role, she is responsible for writing and managing contracts, assisting with software implementation, and management of admin staff and procedures at SFCS. So please do send in your questions as they occur to you, and I will be back at the end to run through those with our presenters. And with that, I will turn it over to Brian and Lauren.
Great, thank you so much. Hello everyone, my name is Brian Guidotti, and I'm a Customer Success Manager, Business Solutions Consultant with Newforma. Just a few quick items before we jump into the fun stuff. I wanted to quickly go over an agenda for today. We're going to talk about Newforma and where we help and kind of fit in to the AEC industry. Then I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, and she's going to talk about SFCS, the contract management workflows that they use internally, go into a demonstration based on those workflows, and then at the end we will be having a question and answer. So please be sure to get your questions in. We'd love to answer as many as you guys have. Really what Newforma is, it's a way to kind of unify your data. A lot of people purchase 2 separate applications for this primarily. They purchase one for project management. How do we take care of our RFIs? How do we log those? How do we facilitate data transfer? How do we take care of field reports from the field instead of having to, take pictures off of my phone, write it down on a yellow kind of hardback legal pad, then come back to the office and transcribe that? How do we get around that? How do we take care of generic items? And then they purchase an information management platform or create it using Windows. That's how do we take care of email? How are we sharing email with the rest of the internal project team? How are we storing, managing, sharing documents? And how are we doing that same exact process but attributing that to drawings and model information? So what Newforma does is it kind of attaches those 2 categories together. There's a lot of project management with information management. So we're going to talk a lot about kind of relationships between items today. I have this CA item. Where are all of the pieces of data, the pieces of correspondence, the documents? Where is that workflow taking place? I don't have to kind of put this mental puzzle piece together in my head anymore of where these documents live over on my share drive or who has those email files in their email box. The really big part of new Forma is how do we organize this information and relate all of this information together so I can find it. So that's a really quick kind of introduction to new Forma. Now I'd like to introduce Lauren Cheney. Take it away, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Brian. Again, my name is Lauren. I'm here with SFCS, and I am here to talk to you all today about a few of the hidden gems available in new Forma contract management. And these are just a few of the lesser known and discussed tools that can be a huge benefit during the CA process. Again, just to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started, prior to joining the firm SFCS, I worked in all things administration, so business administration, management, the works. And I originally joined SFCS as a project administrative assistant, and I was working mostly on project administration from master planning and concepts all the way through to construction administration. So the majority of my time was spent on specifications and then also processing construction administration items like RFIs, submittals, change orders, and so on. Like Carla said, I am currently an associate, so I am writing and managing contracts, and I'm working with contract management in Deltec. I also assist with all of our software implementation that we use in our office, and training, like our programs like new Forma and a lot of the other tools that we're using. To give just a little bit of background on how I got pulled into that new Forma training gig, when we started the new Forma initiative back in about 2015, I was in the pilot group for training. We did testing, and then we also did early adoption, which was, for me, a really awesome match. I'm kind of a geek, so I love software, and I have a really well-rounded understanding of workflow needs. So I ended up becoming the primary new Forma trainer for my firm, SFCS. And SFCS is, again, a full-service architectural, engineering, and interior design firm. We were established way back in the roaring 1920s, so we've been around for quite a while now. Over the past 72 years or so, we've primarily been working in the retirement housing industry, and we have actually planned and designed over 200 senior living communities throughout the United States. However, through the history of the firm, since about the 1920s, we've also designed a lot of higher education campuses. We've provided services to cultural facilities and civic facilities as well. And our firm has 4 offices in 4 different states, as you can see. Between all the 4 different offices, we have about 110 employees, give or take. We are located in Pennsylvania, Kentucky, North Carolina, and then we have our headquarters here in Roanoke, Virginia, which is the office that I actually work out of. So as you can imagine, having our offices spread out all over 4 different states was an extremely significant motivation for us to acquire new Forma as our project management tool. We really needed that collaboration. We needed an effortless communication, and we needed that workflow, because our offices do not work independently of one another on our projects. We collaborate virtually on every single project that we're awarded. And as you can see with the little blue markers here, our projects have been spread out all throughout the United States. So again, this was a really significant motivation for getting new Forma as our project management tool. Not only did we want to ensure that we're able to collaborate with our in-house team, we wanted that project to flow seamlessly through each phase for our owners, the consultants, and then the owner's in-house team as well. So having that project management tool that had the platform for our external team as well was extremely important for us. Just like all of you all, I'm sure, we wanted to provide not only a great product for our clients, but we wanted to provide that transparent workflow as well. Now, before we dive into new Forma Project Center for the demo, I wanted to take you all on just a brief tour of the SFCS pre-new Forma workflow. So I wanted to show you all that rigmarole that we had to go through just to process one CA item. And this would apply to RFIs, submittals, CCDs, basically any CA item coming to SFCS from external team members. And just as a side note, I have actually talked to a lot of folks in the industry at the New Forma World Conference that I attend every year, and I've found out that our procedures were pretty similar to most other firms. So you all can probably sympathize as I walk you through that really painful process. Some of the biggest problems that I think we experienced, besides the amount of time that it took us to process each item, was incorrect information. We had a lot of lost data, and then we had a lot of redundancies as well. We just had little accountability because we had really no reliable way to track our tasks. And then communication between team members was difficult. We had our folks traveling from site to site all over the United States, and then they're traveling to meetings with clients as well. So all in all, it was just a really unreliable process, which obviously are more reasons why we needed New Forma. So here's the basic workflow. I'm sure you all are familiar for our standard CA items. The contractor in the field would submit, let's say, an RFI. The item would be sent via email, and hopefully we got it. I think in the industry we've all experienced that hit or miss internet connection on the construction site, so hopefully we even got the thing in the first place. The RFI would come in through an admin. The admin would have to save the PDF to the server. They have to log the thing into Excel spreadsheet because that was really the only way that we could track it. Then the item would get pushed off to the reviewer. So all of that just to get that item from the admin onto the person who needed to review it. Then generally speaking, the reviewer would forward their response onto the CA person for final approval. I think for most of us, our construction administrators are the ones in the field, and they have their hands on everything out there, so they really need to touch that item before it actually goes back to the contractor. And then 99% of the time they're in the field, they're working off of their phones, so the item would get pushed to the admin. Again, that admin would save the response to the server, log it onto the spreadsheet, and then send it back to the contractor. So for us and how many projects we have, this just felt like an inordinate amount of work for just one CA item. I couldn't even fit the whole process onto one slide. I tried, it looked awful, and that's probably about as awful as it felt when we were actually going through that terrible process. And this was not even accounting for if there were multiple reviewers or if a consultant was involved or owner's rep needed to chime in. So we're talking about an obscene amount of time for each individual task with a really unreliable process. So again, there was very little accountability. We had no idea who even had the items. Right? We had no idea who was responsible for the next step or if it even made it back to the contractor. And honestly, we just really couldn't take it anymore. We needed an efficient process. We needed transparency. We needed something that was going to be reliable. So we did our research, and we found New Forma. And because it was the most talked about system and seemed to have the best reviews, we honestly just dove right in. So now instead of a 12 and 13 step process, we're down to just a few. We've got that contractor inputting the data directly into InfoExchange. The item is received by the reviewer, and then just within a few clicks, that reviewer can get to work. And then once the reviewer is done, the contractor or the construction administrator has reviewed it, that item goes directly back to the contractor. So with our new process, and again, that goes for all CA items, not just RFIs, a lot of those steps and procedures were really eliminated. We've gotten our CA processing time down to about a fourth of what it was. Plus, now we have that reliable real-time data, and we have that accountability back. Also, because of the customized reports, we're able to provide that data to our project team at any time. I can't even begin to explain how gratifying it was to us to be sitting in a meeting and have an owner request, say, a log of ASIS or proposal request in a meeting, and then within minutes we're able to produce that data, and it's live, it's reliable. Or better yet, that owner could just go into InfoExchange to view it themselves. So essentially now we've really solved a lot of our biggest issues where project workflow was concerned. And then we have all sorts of other contract management tools at our disposal that are producing a more efficient workflow. And that is actually what I wanted to share with you all today. So the 5 little-known secrets to a more efficient contract management process. I wanted to show you all how we can track project progress, starting with tracking your addendas in Project Center all the way through to the end of your project. So we're really able to see the progression of the project without having to rummage through those old files or dig through hundreds and hundreds of emails. Also, you can track the progress of each individual item with change logs. So you're showing the entire history of each individual item from the initial email transfer or info exchange transfer through the workflow, and you're also connecting the communication that took place all along the way. We're also going to take a look at one of my favorite tools, which is the Relate To options that are available. So with each item, you can process, in your process, you can directly relate another CA contract management or task so that you're creating that streamlined connected history. So we're linking those addendas to pre-bid RFIs, and we can connect those RFIs to the proposal requests and ASIs, which is what I'm going to show you all today. And then another one of my favorite tips that is probably the most simple, but also one of the most helpful, I think, is that we can file our emails that pertain to a specific CA item directly with that item. So let's say we're having a conversation about a specific ASI. After you create the ASI, that correspondence isn't lost in the flurry of emails. Now it's connected directly to the item, which will essentially allow you to see why that ASI was required in the first place. So you're creating that history that can be referenced at any point in the future. We are also going to see how you can create file transfers directly from the various activity centers. So we're creating an addenda in new Forma, and we can send that file transfer directly through the addenda tool. So again, we're creating that transparent workflow. So that is certainly enough PowerPoint slides and chatting, so I would like to get directly into the demo. If you'll bear with me just a moment, I'll share my screen and open up Project Center. So here we have our didn't mean to click that yet. We have our Training Two-Tone Village project, which is 8675309. I hope at least a few of you get that reference. It's my favorite song from the 80s. What I want to show you all first is one of the less talked about tools in New Forma Project Center, but it's actually one of the most helpful tools for me personally. I'm not sure about you all, but typically before New Forma, our firm didn't log and track addendas, so we had a lot of questions after they were issued. We needed to know, what drawings were included, what specifications did we modify, did the bidders actually get the addenda, did they open the file transfer, or did they open the email rather? And the only way that we had to find those answers were to end up thumbing through a bunch of PDFs or digging through the files. So we just really didn't have a good way to track those changes that were made other than a list of drawings in Excel. So now with an Addenda log here, we are able to input that data directly into New Forma. And because we're able to associate those drawing files and specifications here with our file summary, now there is an easily accessible documentation of all of those revisions that were made to your contract documents. So you're tracking that project process early on before construction has actually even started. And because we're able to issue those addendas directly from Project Center without leaving the tool, you can see here we've got addenda number 2, which is in draft form. Instead of having to leave the system or send an email or even go into info exchange, I could right-click and select my close, send and close. And now I'm able to select all the documents that are directly related to the addenda. I can select OK, and then that's going to initiate the file transfer. So as you can see, I haven't even had to leave the addenda tool. Now, I won't actually send that file transfer out just to save a little time today. So what that's doing is it's producing that change log of information that is absolutely vital for all the tracking purposes. So with the change log tab, I can see when that document was created. I can see all of the modifications that were made with the items. I've got my timestamps. I've also got the name of the responsible party. Also, because we sent that file transfer out with the Addenda tool in the Activity Center, if I select my Related tab, I can see my file transfer listed here. So I haven't actually had to go into a separate Activity Center to see that data. If I double-click on my Addenda, that form will be populated. So not only can we make sure that everyone received the information, but here you can see that that contractor, who is Lauren Cheney Trading, actually downloaded the file on the 24th at 4:19. And since we're in Related, again, like I said, this is one of my favorite tools. I can select on the Related To tab to relate all other sorts of documents. Now, for us, most of the time, our addendas are a result of our pre-bid RFIs. So that was the reason the addenda was generated in the first place. So I can select my Related To option. I could select my pre-bid RFIs from my list of recent documents, or I could select another project item. If my Look To is on RFIs, which it is, I can highlight all of the pre-bid RFIs that were directly related to that addenda, select OK, and when the screen refreshes, now in your related items, not only are you receiving or seeing the addenda, you're seeing the transfer, and you're seeing all of the pre-bid RFIs that were directly related to the addenda. Now, I know most of the time you guys are probably going to get about 555 pre-bid RFIs, so your list is going to be a little bit longer, but you get the point that we're connecting the dots and we're creating that history for each item. The last thing that I'd like to show you all in the Addenda Activity Center is the email log. So if we've got several emails, any sort of correspondence, which we always do regarding the addenda, if I select the Add option, Newforma will automatically go to recent emails that have been filed. I can select whichever emails pertain to the addenda, select Open, and again, Newforma is going to populate all of the emails that were directly related to that item directly in the addendum number 1. So we're creating that history that can really be referenced at any point in the future. So 10 years from now, hopefully, if you're asked to renovate the same project, you're able to now trace the steps with the project team throughout the entire history of that project. So as you guys can see, I've really only discussed so far one project center activity center, which is the addendas. There are a multitude of tasks in each activity center that are going to allow you to create that seamless connection between all of your contract items. And again, this process can be used in each individual task and activity center. For example, the next thing that I'd like to show you all today are the ASIs. Now, for us, 99% of the time, ASIs are going to be generated as the result of an RFI. So the contractor is asking us a question, and as we clarify, we realize that we need to make an adjustment that's not going to affect the fee. So let's say, for example, that we go into our RFIs. We have RFI number 106 here. And this is basically just the contractor asking for information regarding doors that an owner had requested. Now, before I close this item out, I already know that I'm going to have to issue an ASI because let's say that door modification inadvertently affected the mechanical requirements for that room. So what we'll do, we'll go through the process of closing the item. I'll select Close, Respond and Close, just like you normally would. When the window populates, I'll insert all of the normal pertinent information to send that item out. Select Answered. I already have my response typed out because forget about trying to type stuff while everybody's watching. So instead of selecting the Create option, which is going to process that RFI and push it out to the contractor, instead what I can do is select Create Related. From the drop-down, I can select Architect Supplemental Instructions. And now I can select Create. So as this is working here, not only is it pushing that RFI back to the contractor, but it's also preparing you to generate that ASI. So if you can just quickly look in the background here, we see that RFI is no longer on my open list. So you've really killed two birds with one stone, creating that project efficiency. So from this screen, I'm going to start to create my ASI. And I haven't even had to leave my screen, so I'm not having to click around a bunch of different activity centers. Again, I can insert all of the pertinent information for the ASI. And now, generally speaking, you're going to have a description that you're prepared to put onto your AIA form. At least that's what we do. So I might populate that here into the description. And now typically we're going to take a pause, right, because we have to actually create the AIA form. We have to modify the drawing. So what I'll do is just select OK. And then now let's say it's later on in the day or it's next week. And now I'm ready to actually go on and finalize that ASI. I have my drawing prepared. I have my AIA form. So I can come back to Project Center, select my Architect Supplemental Instructions. I'll see that it's populated here on my list. And now I can prepare to send and close. So what we'll do on the next screen is open up any of the documents that I'd like to send off to the contractor with the ASI. I'll populate my distribution. This is going to be for construction. Now, I'm not going to send anything into the remarks box because this was not something that had to be reviewed, but I can select my files to send, select Add to Files, and Forma is going to pop me into my ASI folder here. Now, this is my ASI form, which is the AIA document, and it's also going to include the drawing that I modified. I could add in any related emails if I want to have that included for the contractor. I could even relate any additional items here as well. Or I could go ahead and create my transfer. Otherwise, I'm done. So again, I have that complete history of the item in my Related Items tab. If I have my cursor on ASI number 3, I can see my file summary. It's going to be here for the rest of eternity, basically, so that all of my team members in the future can view it. I also have my related items. And what do you know? That RFI, without having to really put in much effort, is going to be listed here. And I didn't relate any emails, but of course I could do that as well. And again, you have that transfer available. So you know that the item was sent off. If I were to double click on it, I could see the history. I could see when the contractor received it, and I can see when anyone else is able to view it. So I've got everything neatly packaged. That process is clear, and we're creating that efficient workflow. Plus, we have that transparency. Now my contractor can go onto Info Exchange. The owners can as well. So all in all, we've really created a workflow that is beneficial for everyone. So for now, those are my secrets. I hope that has been helpful today. I am going to go back to the main screen here. And so Carla, I think that you were going to open up the floor for any questions we might have.
Sure. So just as a reminder, if you've joined us and didn't hear my intro in the beginning, you can drop any questions that you have in the Q&A box, which is on the right side of most people's screens. And I've got one to start with here is that from a multi-office perspective, could you paint the picture of what it might be like before and after you making these changes?
Oh, absolutely. You know, before we were primarily dealing with emails, and it was just a really difficult process. So sure, you could pick up the phone and say, hey, so-and-so, you know, could you modify that document? But then now you're playing the waiting game. We really didn't have a really efficient tool to send those collaboration or to do anything and collaborate really efficiently. So we would have to send those documents via email. you'd have to wait on one person. Maybe it's two people who are trying to review the drawing file or mark it up. So you didn't have that consistent workflow. And then, of course, you're just playing the waiting game. So now that we have everything in new format, everyone can get into an activity center. Let's say that they're marking up a drawing or reviewing an RFI. Everything is tracked. So on the Changelog, you know if the other person, let's say I'm in engineering here in Roanoke, but I've gotten my electrical engineer in Louisville. I can see exactly when they have reviewed that item, and I know when it's my turn. So I feel like that communication is just really improved now that we're doing everything in one system and not having to rely on phone calls and text messages and emails.
Sure. And another question is, how long did it take to train people on this new workflow? Because you were saying that, you know, for the longest time you were doing something else. So the question is kind of how was that transition?
Sure, absolutely. When we first initiated New Forma, what we did was we trained the entire firm per office on some of the more simple tasks, like the file transfers and filing emails, of course, because that was huge for us. So once we got through that, we probably took, you know, maybe a few weeks. We let everybody really get used to the product and get comfortable with it. And then we started training everyone on individual activity centers. So the next step was to train everybody on RFIs. And then probably within the same week, we trained them on submittals. So we let people then start using RFIs and submittals for their projects before we moved on to the next activity center. I'd say in all, implementation took maybe about a year. But it was really because we wanted to give everybody plenty of opportunity to get used to the system, to get used to the new workflow. And I mean, now it's just an open floor. Everyone is using the tools. Everyone is coming up with new ways every day to improve the workflows. So I think all in all, if you go as slowly as we did just to make sure implementation is really successful and you have 100% users, you know, in your company, that you would probably take about 6 months to a year before everyone is 100% using every single tool that's available.
And we have another one from the chat, which is, can I ask where the AutoCAD drawings are stored and how they're linked in New Forma's system?
Well, that honestly depends on which activity center you're using. Brian, you could probably step in here. For us, our drawing files were saved on our system. And then when you go into the individual activity centers, you're accessing them from where they are on your server. Brian, would you like to fill in a little bit more, I think, technically speaking, how that operates?
Yeah, you bet. So a really big part of New Forma is that we are what I call a reference system. So we are not necessarily storing all of your data inside of New Forma. We're relating and looking at it exactly where it's stored right now. So something that we didn't necessarily go over today, but if you go to our website, we have pre-recorded webinars, and you might be interested in the one that's labeled as communications. But we can link to your file share, and we search and scan and index every single piece of item that's associated with that J drive or P drive or SharePoint document library. Doesn't matter where it's stored. That includes AutoCAD drawings, DWGs, DGNs, that kind of thing. So where they're stored can be one place, and then where they're linked to could be another. So if you have an RFI or a submittal or some sort of CA item that's linked to an AutoCAD drawing, we're automatically just going to put it into the related items or the supported documents area inside of that specific line item in one of those activity centers. So it's stored exactly where it's stored today. We're scanning it, indexing it so you can search for it in New Forma, but then we're also allowing you to link it wherever you need to associated with any type of CA or project item. Hopefully that helps.
Great. Next question is that you talked about using New Forma for construction, but what about using it for design?
Sure. We actually use New Forma from the startup of the project. I mean, for the most part, in the design phases, what we're using it for is to find our files. New Forma uses that optical recognition. So on your server, you have the files, but in New Forma, you're able to search for those files. You're also starting to load your project team contacts. So now we're not really having all of our individual Outlook contacts storing the contacts for the project team. So you're using that tool, which is amazing. It's a global contacts list. We're also using the system to really send our file transfers. I mean, from the start of the project, when we send out our RFP, we've already created that project in New Forma. So from the very beginning, we're sending our file transfers directly to the owner. We're sending out our RFPs if anyone is bidding on the project, say we have our consultant. We also are starting to track our drawings in document control as well. It's a really great way, again, because we're a collaborative company. We might have our engineers working here, and then our architects are working in the Philadelphia office. So in using document control, you really have that transparent tracking of where all of the documents are, where they're saved, and then what kind of revisions you're on at the time. So even though you're not using the contract management tools, all of the other tools in New Forma are the ones that you're going to be using when you start in that design process.
Great. And can either of you expand on how keeping that CA process internal to your firm might be beneficial for an owner?
Internal to the firm as in, I'm not really. Can you elaborate on that question? Was that one that just came through?
I can ask for elaboration, but don't have it yet.
I think maybe what they're asking, for me, I think keeping that CA process inside of New Forma is allowing the owner to log on to Info Exchange at any time, so that they can see where's that RFI, what's next. Because a lot of the times the owner, maybe they've made a request, maybe they've participated in a meeting with the contractor, and now the contractor is loading a bunch of RFIs. So they're really able to track the process and the progress of each item from Info Exchange, from outside of SFCS. Also, you're really saving a lot of money, because the process that I went through for CA, I mean, to process each item was probably 10 minutes, and now the reviewer hasn't even gotten it yet. So because we've gotten a program like New Forma, now we're able to really provide a more efficient fee for the owner, let's be honest. So we're really making ourselves more attractive in the bidding process, because we're able to offer a lower fee percentage, because we've cut out all of this time. We all know time is money. So when the owner sees, oh yeah, they're using New Forma, I know that this is going to be a really efficient workflow all the way through the CA process.
And that kind of dovetails really well into this next question, which is, have you gotten feedback since you've, implemented this, just from your clients and from people you've worked with, about the process changing, or have there been any success stories that you wanted to share?
Oh, absolutely. We've had all the time owners saying that, they really appreciate that when we're coming into the meetings, right? Everybody's got their laptops. They love that they're able to log on to Info Exchange. They're able to click through. They can see. Everybody wants to know the RFIs that are outstanding, right? Once they're processed, it's fine. But, what's outstanding? What is taking a really long time? Whose hands are these items in? They really appreciate even the ASIs and the proposal requests, because we have all of those loaded into New Forma as well. So before, you'd come to a meeting with a mile-high stack of papers which had all of the proposal requests and the COPs. Well, now they're just clicking on Info Exchange. So they're really able to fly through these meetings without having to thumb through all the documents. So even for the owner now, imagine before we're having hours for our CA meetings or OAC meetings every week, and now they're cut down to, maybe 30 minutes because all of that information is there and available for you. Also, being able to go back in time and find these documents. Like I said, Nuforma tracks everything for you, so I can't tell you how many times, someone has sent something out, and maybe they accidentally deleted it from their emails. Now they're easily able to go into Nuforma, type in a few search words, and they're able to find that document or find that file transfer or find that ASI without having to dig through files. So, yeah, we get feedback all the time from folks who really like the program and appreciate that they've got that data readily available whenever they need it.
Great. And do you have any advice for folks if they're thinking about implementing this themselves, kind of where they should start? Maybe that's a question for Brian, too, if you have people who are interested in starting the process of getting on board with Nuforma.
Yeah, you bet. We're always available via email. We have 2 email addresses. One is answers@nuforma.com if you have general questions and you'd like to reach out to us. And then the other would be projectcenter@nuforma.com. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I believe my contact information will be on the thank you email that you'll all be getting as well. So if I can do anything to help any of you out, please feel free to reach out.
Also, just to add on to that, I kind of already talked about a bit of our process. I would really recommend, dive right into the system with your initial training team. Get a group of champions is what the Nuforma folks like to call it, and I love that term because these are the folks who are going to be there to lend a helping hand as you really start to push these procedures out. Start with that core group. Get everybody involved. Go through that, really detailed training, and then push the rest of the processes out to the rest of your firm pretty slowly. Let everybody have a nice opportunity to get acclimated. It is a new procedures. So you don't want to shock everybody. So, start with those file transfers, start with filing the emails, start with the transmittal sheets, and then let everybody get acclimated and then move on to the next step. You also really want to make sure that you've got people prepared to train your outside folks as well. The Info Exchange is a great tool. Everybody seems to like that from outside of SFCS. So you want to make sure that when you're getting ready to start training on RFIs and submittals, you're also ready to start training those contractors. Hopefully you have the opportunity to add those details into your specifications as well. I think that's really important. So a contractor reads through the specification, sees that you're using Nuforma, and when they're ready to do that pre-construction meeting, now you can do your quick training and everybody's on board.
Great. Does anybody else have additional questions? I don't see any remaining in the Q&A or the chat box, but if you do, here's your last chance to get a couple of questions in. Let me just give people a minute if they have any additional questions here. All right, so I think what I'll do is we can wrap it up here, and if there are additional questions, like we had mentioned before, the contact for Brian and Lauren will be available in the post-webinar email. So I just want to thank, again, Brian and Lauren for joining us today, and thanking Nuforma especially for their support of today's event. And before we sign off, just a couple of remaining bits of business. Please stay tuned for that follow-up email that I mentioned before on accessing the on-demand version of the program. And we're always eager to get your feedback, so there will be a short survey that will appear once you log out of the webinar, and we encourage you to take that because all of the feedback really helps us to make these better in the future. So we want to hear from you on that. And also, you can feel free to contact me directly. My email is clauter, Lauter, @divcom.com. So thank to everyone for taking the time today to attend this webinar, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much to Brian and Lauren.
Thank you.